I am the one who's blessed to be with you and to be in the presence of His grace, and also Abuna Matthias. It's an honor and privilege to be with you, and I know this is the second time to take the blessings of being with you in Bold. Correct, Eric? Where's Eric? Okay, second time. Yes. So I enjoyed being with you and with Father David. Learned so much from Father David the past couple of days, and as you know, Father David and I go way, way back. So I would like to build on, and it's he set a wonderful foundation, and we can build on this foundation, get into some practical tactics and principles. There will be an overlap, so forgive me. You can consider this a review to what we've heard from Father David. Let me give you a quick overview. This evening we're discussing, as you see on the screen, current challenges to evangelism. If you want to evangelize, you need to know the world that you are evangelizing to. What are the challenges so that you can adjust your method and your approach? To be impactful, you need to understand the audience and the challenges. But then I can't just present the problem and say, hey, go fix it, deal with it. God willing, tomorrow, we will discuss what now? What's the solution? What do we do? Practically speaking, what do we do? If I get asked this question, what do I say? And how do I say it? And so on. So I will have some role-playing to make it interactive and interesting. I also would like, and then this is going to be tomorrow, both talks, God willing. Also, I would like to make this interactive. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and participate with me. So we'll make it interesting, because after dinner, I personally am and the cake and all that. Anyways, so current challenges to evangelism. But before I begin, I've had questions, workshop questions. Apologetics, evangelism. Apologetics, evangelism. Are these concepts interchangeable? What's the connection or the relationship between apologetics, that is defending the Christian faith, and evangelism, and that is sharing our Christian faith? If you can tell me, raise your hand and tell me, what do you think is the connection or the relationship between these two? What do you think? So we're doing the Q&A kind of as part of the integrated in the talk. Both make our faith known. Excellent. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's the source of the evangelism. Like.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. What else?
I think defending the faith is evangelizing, depending on the context, maybe.
Excellent. As you evangelize, you're also defending or removing misconceptions. Excellent, Bisho. Yes.
I think defending the faith is for someone that wants to go a little deeper. Like, it's not enough by just having faith. I'm a Christian. I just want to dig deeper and deeper and
perfect.
Deeper and deeper.
Perfect. Yes. Anyone else? Say more.
They're both.
This term is very dear to my. Say more.
They're both about truth. They're not about what I want or what he wants.
Perfect.
Or whatever. It's just about not defending your way. You're defending the truth.
Excellent. Defending the truth and sharing the truth. Excellent. I'll give you an analogy that will illustrate. Was there someone else? Okay. It will illustrate. In my opinion, I think this is how I see apologetics and evangelism and how they intersect. I see that apologetics is taking out the weeds, whereas evangelism is throwing in the seeds. See, hatta it rhymes just to make it easy to understand. So before you throw in the seeds of faith, you got to take out the weeds. The misconceptions, the false assumptions, the doubts, and so on, before you throw in the seeds. Both are important, essential part of the mission of the church, as we heard from Father David. It's not, and Father Matthias also mentioned last night, apologetics and evangelism, they're not optional. They are part of being a Christian. You are an apologist. You are an evangelist, according to the measure of the gift that was given to you. And to illustrate, again, the relationship between apologetics and evangelism, you'll see that, I have this table for you. Apologetics helps you believe that, whereas evangelism helps you believe in. Apologetics will help you believe that God exists. Evangelism will dig a little deeper, will help you believe in that God. Faith and trust. Apologetics aims to secure consent, whereas evangelism aims to secure commitment to what you have consented to. And as you know, this is implied. Apologetics answers objections and evangelism shares the gospel. Both are inseparable. As I mentioned, both are inseparable. And I'll tell you, if you do one without the other. What's evangelism without apologetics? It's a monologue. It's a lecture. It's just basically talking, a one-dimensional lecture. What is apologetics without evangelism? It's an intellectual exercise. You're basically discussing some philosophical argumentation without any objective. Both are essential. When you're evangelizing, you're doing apologetics and vice versa. All right, let's get into the challenge. Any question on these two? We can do more and more, but I just wanted to, back one, yes. But I wanted to just share with you the relationship between apologetics, defending the faith, evangelism, sharing the faith, and how they're interchangeable and inseparable. All right. Cultural challenge. I don't want to make this too and make you think that khalas, we're living in a very dark world and the end is near and so on. But I need to share with you the challenges that we here are facing in the West and maybe in the East as well. Eventually we'll be in the East. So that we can be impactful evangelists. For the past 40 to 50 years or so, we have been experiencing, thank you, we've been experiencing what I call a paradigm shift. A shift in values, principles, worldviews. Sociologists and historians call this paradigm shift postmodernism. Any of you heard of postmodernism? You have. That's basically the world, the era, the time we live in. I'm not going to get into postmodernism because it can get a little technical or academic, but I'll just very briefly tell you what postmodernism is and the effect, the result of this shift in paradigm. Kirby Anderson, he's a author, an apologist, Christian author and apologist. In his book, Truth Decay, he says, postmodernism, the worldview of the 21st century, poses the greatest challenge to Christianity, and we'll know why. What is it? Very briefly, just to give you the textbook definition, what is postmodernism? It's an intellectual mood, cultural expressions, basically, that are becoming increasingly dominant in our society. That's postmodernism. And I'll tell you the specifics and the attributes of this worldview. And this is the challenge that we as Christians, as Coptic Orthodox Christians, face in today's world. Before I share with you the challenge, it's also important and essential to know how did we get there. And I'll give you a quick history, very brief, history from the 1st century to the 21st century, very brief. 20 centuries in 2 minutes. Now, how did we get to this point of postmodernism? Well, first, from the 1st century to the early 18th century, we lived in an era, a pre-modern era. It was labeled, known as pre-modern. And what was prevalent in this era between the 1st and the early 18th century, the worldview of theism. People believed in God. God exists. He created the universe, and we have a relationship with God. And how do I follow? What do I follow to attain truth? Faith. Faith will be the vehicle that will take me to truth. And it comes from God. Now, something happened in the mid-18th century to the early 20th century. From pre-modernism to modernism. The explosion of science, technology. What helped in this transformation? The Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment period in Europe. What happened? You go from theism, belief in God, to atheism. God doesn't exist. God, sorry, we don't need you anymore. We've now accomplished what we need to accomplish. You are irrelevant to us. And you see people like proponents of this movement, atheistic movement, Immanuel Kant, philosophers, Karl Marx, his Marxism, Sigmund Freud, his psychoanalysis, Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, Charles Darwin, and so on. These were the champions, if you will, of this period between the mid-18th century to the late 20th century. Now, what happened after that? And that's the time we live in. This is the era we live in. From modernism to postmodernism. It's no longer atheism, yet it's atheism. We're dealing now with replacement gods, lowercase g, to the one true God. 3 replacement gods. Humanism, that's a worldview that says man is the measure of all things. I now become God. Materialism, my possessions, my money, my acquisitions, they are now God. And hedonism, my body, my pleasure, that is my God. 3 replacement gods. I call them the replacement gods of the atheist. Because when you deny the one true God, you fabricate for yourself a made-up God. One of those 3, if not all 3. So truth comes from God in the theistic era. With atheism, truth comes from reason. Science is my source of truth. Sadly, in this generation or this era, truth is dead. Truth comes from feelings. What I feel to be true. And we're going to talk about the supremacy of feelings in a minute. Who are the gurus of this time? I'm sure you've heard these names. Deepak Chopra, Oprah, Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle, Paulo Coelho, and his infamous book, The Alchemist. Any of you read this book? Heard this book? You've read it? The whole thing? It's short? You're joking, right? The Alchemist is about this big. Maybe. Anyways. Don't waste your time. Save your money. I think you are, because The Alchemist is a pretty thick book. Yeah. Oh, then it's... Oh, the small fictional one is not that good. The real one is. Anyways, they're both not that good. Anyways, so this is what I wanted to share with you. Where we were and we are where we are now. What happened with the postmodernistic movement? Well, modernism came about as the result, as I mentioned to you, of the scientific kind of discovery and explosion and advancement and accomplishment and all that. But there remained a deep down need for the supernatural, the metaphysical, that modernism could not fulfill and satisfy. We have this inescapable need for that which is spiritual. So what did we do? Instead of going back to the modernism era and going back to God, we decided to fabricate our own God in the postmodernist era. Anyways, this quick history, but it's important to know how we have progressed, or should I say, regressed. What does the Bible say about these 3 eras? You'll see, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. That describes the first 18 centuries. Then the atheistic period, The fool says in his heart, there is no God. Well, what do you think is the verse that's applicable to this time and age? Well, 2 Timothy 3:1. In the last days, men will be lovers of themselves, humanism. Lovers of money, materialism. Lovers of pleasure, hedonism, rather than lovers of God. I think St. Paul was prophesying. I think he had a vision of what's going to happen in the 21st century. It's precisely a depiction of what's going on. All right. What are the results and the effects of this postmodern worldview and ideology? Several. First, the death of truth. Well, let me just share this sad news to you all. Truth is dead. Not to us, but to the world that we live in. Truth has died. There's no longer absolute objective truth. Let me explain why. What is, if I were to ask you this philosophical question, what is truth? What do you say? What is truth? Not whose truth. I'm just saying just this concept called truth. What is it? According to Aristotle, philosophically speaking, according to the correspondence theory of truth, you can look that up, correspondence theory of truth. It says, truth is that which corresponds to reality. If I'm explaining something in the real world, if I say, I have a black car parked outside, that's a statement. I want to validate whether this statement or see if this statement is true or false. I go outside and see if I have a black car or not. Does it match reality? Then it must be true. That's called the correspondence theory of truth. Whatever that is in reality that you're describing must be true. But that begs another question. What is reality? In this day and age, my friends, reality has become a social construct. You create your own reality. Hence, you create your own truth. We all know that on social media. I create my own profile, my own this, my own that, my own my own world, and I live in this world as if it's my own reality. That's my truth. True for me, but not true for you. I've heard this expression hundreds of times on college campuses. There is no meta-narrative. Everyone can attest to his truth or her truth, or claim rather that they hold on to the truth. Objectively, absolutely not. Subjectively, yes. Truth has become subjective and relative. You all know Stephen Colbert, or many of you have heard of him, late night show host. And he's a Catholic, by the way. I'm not sure about devout, but just Catholic. And then he coined this term, truthiness. Truthiness. And actually, it gained a lot of acceptance in the Hollywood world. No surprise. And this is what he said. The belief, that what is truthiness? It's the belief in what you feel to be true rather than what the facts will support. If this does not reflect the culture we live in, I don't know what does. He goes on to say, facts do not matter. What matters is how you feel. You are the final decision maker of the truth. And you know what is the year of the word of the year in 2016, according to Oxford Word of the Year, 2016. Do you know what it was? Post-truth. You know what the word of just for fun, you know what the word of the year in 2020 was? Anyone knows? Yarit COVID. You know what it was? I thought it was funny. It was actually very true. You know what it is? You're on mute. You are on mute. Because everybody was doing, Zoom and Microsoft meetings and Teams and all that. And anyways. In 2016, post-truth. What does that mean? It means relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. what does the scripture say? I think we heard this verse from Father David earlier. For the time will come, I personally believe that the time has come, when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. So number one, the death of truth. Well, what's the kind of, it goes hand in hand with that death of truth. What do you get? Moral relativism. And don't, worry about the fancy expression. Basically what it says is that when it comes to moral issues, there are no universally objective right or wrong answers. Everything is relative to you or to the situation you're in. What you think is wrong, I think is right. What you think is right, I think it's wrong, and so on. That's what moral relativism is all about. There's no right and wrong. Now, I want you to do this mental exercise with me. As I go through these features of the challenges that we have, I want you to think of how this does impact your effort to evangelize to this world. And how does that shape your evangelistic approach? Because we want to tie that back to the overarching theme of our conference. Let me give you a statistic. According to Barna Research Group, barna.org, you can go to Barna, BARNA.org, George Barna. 81%, that's a pretty high number. 81% of young Americans have adopted a view that all truth is relative to the individual and his or her circumstances. All truth is relative. Number 3, the rejection of objective knowledge. You don't know and you can't know that which you claim to know. Knowledge now is seen as relative, as uncertain, as subjective, as depending on whatever mood you're in. What's more important than knowledge? Intuition and experience. And I would like to add one more thing. Feelings. I now can come to the knowledge of the truth based on how I feel. Let me share with you what Jean Edward Veith is an author, scholar, and a professor of literature. In his book, Postmodern Times, he said, knowledge is no longer seen as absolute truth. Rather, knowledge is seen in terms of rearranging information into new paradigms. And an article in the Encyclopedia Britannica says, postmodernists deny that there are statements about reality that are objectively true or false. They deny that it is possible for human beings to know some things with certainty. That's why you see now the rise of a different ideology or different worldview. People do not say, hey, I'm an atheist. They now use a more fashionable term. I'm an agnostic. What does agnostic mean? What is agnosticism? What is it? I don't know. That's what I don't. The alpha in Greek is the opposite of. Atheism, atheos, opposite of God or lack of God or no God. Same thing. Agnosis. Gnosis in Greek means to know. It begins with the letter G, gnosis. That's why in English we have it as know, because it comes from gno, but we just don't K. So agnosis or agno means I don't know. In Latin, agnosticism is ignoramus. You know what that means in English? Ignorant. That's what agnosticism is. So it's I don't know, because no one can know. Because knowledge is now subjective and relative. All right. How many did we say so far? 3, I think? 4. Here's another big one. Deconstructionism. Of course, you add ism to any word and you sound very intelligent. You know, right? Ism. So it's a world movement called deconstructionism. It's the deconstruction of language. Language is a social construct as well. it's a human convention. You come up with language, but it cannot convey truth claims. And here is the danger, is that now it's not up to the author's intentions. It's now the interpreter. I like to understand this text this way because it fits into my paradigm. It fits into my world. I know what St. Paul was saying, but I like what he said there and I don't like what he said here. And I think this is what he said because it fits into my worldview. It's up to me now as the receiver of the text to make up whatever meaning you want. You deconstruct the language. Do you see that happening? I've had a conversation with His Grace Bishop Yusuf a couple of months ago on one word in the scriptures. I think it was 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 9 that dealt with homosexuality. And then I'm sure you've heard this debate that some were saying that this word actually means that, and this is not what we think it does mean. It means this, and they went on and on and on and on. What did they really do? They deconstructed the language, the word. What did St. Paul mean to say? Well, what did he say elsewhere, like in Romans 1 and other places? It doesn't matter. I think this is the meaning I would like to extrapolate out of this text. Deconstructionism. In an article in the University of New Mexico, language is not stable. We can never exactly say what we mean. Literature cannot give a reader any one single meaning. Language is too ambiguous. Literature cannot provide any outside meaning. Texts cannot represent reality. A deconstructionist will emphasize the ambiguities of the language and the variety of meanings and possible readings of the text. All right, let me give you some examples. Make it more practical. I'll share with you some concepts, and I'll share with you the biblical understanding of these concepts and how we have redefined these terms and deconstructed the language that we have on the screen now. But I would like to get your help. A concept like tolerance. What is the biblical understanding of tolerance? Can someone help me? Excellent. If you want to say more, love everyone, but there's a
Love all, but not necessarily agree or follow others.
beautiful
Others' actions.
Perfect. That's what I was looking for. Excellent. That's it. Accepting and loving others without having to agree with their ideas or behavior. That's the biblical definition of tolerance. Now let me ask you, what is the cultural's definition of tolerance? Agree with what? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Their choices, their behavior, their lifestyle. And not only, I was just going to say, and you said it beautifully, yes, you said that, right? Not only support, yarit, agree and support, celebrate and promote. Believe me, I'm not going to give you examples. All I have to say is I live in San Francisco. That's all I have to say. I'm going to go on. All right. Accepting, this is the culture's definition. Accepting that everyone's beliefs, values, and lifestyles are equally true and equally valid. That takes us to the next concept or the next term. Moral judgments. What is the biblical understanding of moral judge another? What is that? What's the biblical understanding of that concept? Anyone? Help me
There's
out.
right and wrong.
Huh?
That God decides right and wrong.
Perfect. Perfectly said. Certain things are morally right or wrong, as determined by a morally perfect being, who is God. Now, when it comes to judging others, what is our culture's definition? What is the question that we always get asked? Who are you to judge? I once said that, the most quoted verse in the scriptures for the past centuries, decades, I should say, or centuries, was John 3:16, right? Right? For God so loved the world. We see it all over the place. Now, what's the most quoted verse in the scriptures now in the 21st century? Not John 3:16, Matthew 7:1. Do not judge. Who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? This is a no judging zone. And we hear all these expressions that, speak freely. That no one can judge you. That is this is the culture's definition of moral judgment. We have no right to judge another person's view or behavior. Here's another one. Freedom. That's a tricky one. Let's get the easy one first. What is our culture's definition of freedom? That's easy. Do whatever you want, whatever pleases you. We live in the free world. Do whatever you want to do. Now, what is the biblical definition of freedom? Okay, raise your hand because I want to hear you all. You say something? Yes, go ahead. Freedom from sin. Excellent. I want more.
You can do what we want. That doesn't mean we should do it. So freedom, like in the biblical meaning, is like we can technically, but culturally is like now we're encouraging, like do whatever you want and you should do it. Take action on it.
Excellent. The key word I was looking for, freedom from sin. You're right. The word should. Yes, sir.
I guess on that, all things are lawful, not all things are
Beautiful.
edifying.
Beautiful or beneficial and edifying. Yeah, excellent. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sayyidina, but I think I've heard Sayyidina and Yusuf many of his sermons. That's the one verse that I've always heard him repeat over and over and over again. He loves that verse. So it's beautifully said. Being free to do what you know you ought or you should do, ultimately freed from sin. Lord Acton, a philosopher and an author, he said, freedom, biblically speaking, is not the license to do what you want to do. It is the power to do what you ought to do. And that answers the question when some youth ask me and they say, hey, George, do you think we'll be free in heaven? Because I will not have a choice to actually sin. And because I don't have a choice, I will not be free. I mean, it sounds logical. Mish keda? I'm not going to be free in heaven. I say, no, hold on a second. What is your definition of freedom? When you define freedom, you'll know that in heaven you will be ultimately free. Because you'll know what you should do. And how do you know what you should do? What is the word you mentioned earlier that was dear to my heart? Truth. Truth. And now you can understand the verse that says, truth, you shall know the truth, and truth will set you free. What's the relationship between truth and freedom? Well, that is the definition of freedom. To know the truth and to do the truth, that is freedom. If you read John 3:21, the Lord Jesus Christ says, he who does the truth comes to the light. Does the truth? I thought truth is an abstract concept. No. Truth is not an abstract concept. Truth is to be done, to be lived, and ultimately to be a person personified in the Lord Jesus Christ. All right, here it is, truth. I think we talked about truth. Another mark of the postmodern era, another challenge, pluralism, which basically says all religions worship the same God. I mean, come on. Why be so narrow-minded and think that only Christians will go to heaven? I mean, God is merciful. God is kind. Everyone you just have to be sincere in your whatever faith that is, and then God will just take you to whatever heaven that is. You know why pluralism, by the way, pluralism is very PC nowadays, politically correct. And I always have to say that whenever you hear the term politically correct, oftentimes it's biblically corrupt. That's what politically correct means. It sounds good. It sounds tolerant. Mish keda? We all just come together and Yeah, and you're a Muslim, you're an atheist, you're a Hindu, you're a Buddhist. We're all worshiping the same God. You know why this is becoming very prevalent in our society? I'll tell you why. So I work in the corporate world. And we go through, and when I was talking about this earlier, we go through some, sensitivity training, diversity and inclusion training, and all of that. And we just we have this emphasis on diversity. Diversity, it's the source of our strength. Now think with me. If diversity is very powerful here on earth and very attractive here on earth, wouldn't it be also the same in heaven? You see the logic? I love diversity on earth. I also love diversity in heaven. So God is also a God of diversities. So he can have the Christians and the Muslims and the atheists all together in one place. It sounds good. Anyways. All right. Let's move on. I've got two more and we'll conclude. Oh, sure. You want to take a picture of this? Of this? The table. Okay. You guys heard? You saw the coexist. I've seen this all over the place. Can't we just coexist and live in peace? The other feature of a couple more postmodernism. I'm just again sharing with you the challenges that we have, ideological challenges and philosophical challenges. Yes, sir. Omar. Pluralism. That it's excellent. Let me explain. I didn't want to. I'm glad you asked the question. So, do we all worship the same God? Let's just ask this question. I'm not gonna even use the scriptures. Don't use the Bible. Just logic and reason. Can we all worship the same God? Absolutely not. Why? One of the laws of logic. Several laws of logic. It's the law of non-contradiction. There's the law of identity, the law of excluded middle, and there's a law called the LNC, the law of non-contradiction. What does this law say? Aristotle puts it beautifully. He says, A cannot be A and non-A in the same time and in the same sense. Today in Texas cannot be Friday and Saturday and Monday. Cannot be. Why? Because these terms are what contradict. They're not different. Because it can be Saturday and it can be sunny. These are two different statements, but they're not contradicting. If you look at all religions, and I did study comparative religions for a number of years, and I studied all those isms, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, all those isms, and I see all their truth claims in a table, and they see contradictions. It's more logical to say all religions are false than to say all religions are true. You see what I'm saying? Logically speaking. So that's why, because of I cannot say the Lord Jesus Christ is a mere prophet in one faith, one religion, and then say the Lord Jesus Christ is God. Listen. I cannot say he was crucified and then he wasn't crucified. Either he was or he wasn't. They both cannot be true. Of course, that doesn't sound tolerant and accepting and PC and all of that, but you know what? That's the truth. Now, how do you know which religion holds to the truth? That's another conversation. The tests of truth. Philosophically, not using the scriptures. I'll just give them to you very quickly. You can Google them. The correspondence theory of truth, the coherence theory of truth, and the empirical theory of truth. So 3, correspondence, coherence, empiricism. But we can talk about this another time. Let's go to the sixth feature of postmodernism, the supremacy of self. The supremacy of self. I am the source of truth. I am the center of this universe. I think borderline narcissism. And this is where you come up with this new movement. I'm sure some of you may have heard of it, and if you haven't, I would advise you to look it up. Expressive individualism. And again, I don't mean just to throw all these words at you, but these are movements that I know that these movements or these ideologies are being introduced to our children on college campuses. They are. not just in California, all over the States and in Canada. Expressive individualism, what does that really mean? In short, in layman's terms, I do me, you do you. We've all heard that. I do me, you do you. I express myself however I want to express myself. Let's listen to Dr. Bruce Ashford. He's a Christian author and a public speaker. He said, Americans have learned to live life without God. Because of our wealth, we tend not to lean on God for material provisions. Because of modern medicine, we rely on doctors for healing. Because of the entertainment industry, we are distracted from Him and the Scriptures. We believe that we are meant to be captains of our own destinies and shapers of our own identities, according to our desires. These conditions encourage the rise of expressive individualism. The last feature is and I think we've kind of discussed this point. It was implied in all the others. The overemphasis on feelings. We live in a generation that listens with its eyes and thinks with its feelings. If it feels good, do it. That was someone's slogan in the 1970s by Oprah says, sorry to reference, anyways, forgive me saying that. Forgive me. Okay, we'll skip that. Well, you can read the slide. Follow your feelings. If it feels right, move forward. If it does not feel right, don't do it. You know, when truth is dead, my friends, well, let me just move quickly. when truth is dead, something will have to take its place. You know what it is? Two things: power and pleasure. The Hitlers and the Hefners of the world. Power and pleasures. And don't ask questions about the names I mentioned. The death of truth. Moral relativism. Actually, I should do like what Abuna David did. Forgive me. Okay, I need your help. If you've taken notes. Death of truth. This is the world we live in. Second, moral relativism. Thank you. Yes. You off by yourself. Excellent. Number 3, deconstruction of language. There's one before that. Exactly. Rejection of objective knowledge. Irini, right? Deconstruction of language. Number 5. Pluralism. All religions worship the same God. 6. The supremacy of self. And 7. Overemphasis on feelings. These are the challenges. How do I then shape my apologetic and evangelistic approach in light of these challenges? Is something that we need to think about, and God willing, tomorrow we will get into those specifics. Glory and honor be to God forever and ever. Amen.